So the philosophy of the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of the government in the next generation. So today's children are basically going to be the citizens of tomorrow, and the citizens are the people who make a government, who control the state of affairs in the next generation. So even the saying "government of the people, for the people, by the people." So these are the children who will form the people of tomorrow. So it is very important that they are educated in that manner. So this is what we will be covering today, or rather we have already covered today, but we are doing this again. So steps towards a true world school. What can we do to bring the world to a classroom? So we'll begin with a discussion on various ticking clocks that represent the world today. Then we'll move on to the purpose of education, the sins of education, things that we need to stay away from. Then the themes are culture, our language, and building resistance for climate change. These are the CBSE themes that are the center of focus of today. Then we'll move on to deep learning, how this learning can be made more, can be brought in with more depth and more meaning. Then a few practical tips that can be employed in the classroom, and the list of online resources that CBSE has provided. So the world is a mirror. Whatever you are inside is basically what is reflected in the world around us. And today, what do we see around us? We see a deterioration in health, both mental and physical. The number of the cases of depression, attention deficit disorder, learning disabilities, uh, Alzheimer's, everything is increasing today. Along with that, even the physical ailments like joints, pain in joints, and various posture related problems, all these things are also increasing today. Along with that, what we see increasing is the lack of sensitivity, lack of responsibility, and lack of concern. So this is most evident in colleges, where the moment a teacher enters the class and tries to teach, most of the students are like, no, no, we don't want to learn anything from you. Just give us the notes, we study by ourselves, and we'll pass the exams. This leads to the future youth who go into society, and these are the people who are least bothered about the future of where even where they are just living, let alone the country. So, throwing rubbish on the road and being inconsiderate with people around them, talking so loudly that you disturb everyone around you. So, this is the general the general behavior of these kind of people. Then the employability problem. We keep hearing in the press, we keep hearing every now and then that India has an employment problem. That there are so many employable youth in the market, but they are not getting jobs. They are not getting recruited. The fact is that they are not employable. They are qualified, but they don't have the skill set that companies need. And it's not that the companies have people who it's not like the companies are working with a full staff. They are also working in a shortage. This is true for every field, from industries to various financial firms to schools, everything. And they would love to have the right kind of people, but there are no right kind of people in the market. So the education system that is supposed to uh, ideally cater to the future of a country, the future of a place, they are not working properly. So basically, our education system is crippled. This is thinking from the perspective that education is supposed to give you a good life because you will get a good job and so on and so forth. But even that is not being done properly. Then moving on to climate change, this is something very obvious that we see around us today, especially today, where monsoons are happening at random timings. Like it just started raining a few days back, even though it is even though summer has not ended by textbook standards. So our textbooks tell us that the summer is supposed to end by the end of May, and rainy season or monsoons are supposed to begin by June. But that is not the case since a couple of years. Last year, or rather the beginning of this year, the monsoons ended by something like January, February. It was raining throughout December also. So there's a massive climate change that we see around us. And now coming to why is this happening? So one way to understand it is if we think of this as social distancing, where social relationship. So our relationship with our roots is growing weaker. So we are growing farther and farther away from our roots. We are forgetting our culture. We are forgetting our past and the knowledge that would normally be passed on from the through words, through speech. We depend more on books, we depend more on marks, and that too not for knowledge, just for getting a good job or uh, s- whatever benchmark for success the society decides. Then another way of thinking about it is um the way Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." So I think, therefore I am means if I'm sentient, if I can think, that means I have an identity, that means I exist. But our Eastern philosophy, what it tells us is, I am, therefore I think. Since I exist, it is my duty to think, it is my duty to be responsible before uh, reacting. In fact, you need to be conscious and then respond, not react. Then the role of grandparents is gradually withering away. We are moving into smaller families instead of extended families. So those stories from grandmothers, or those incidents where if a grandmom falls sick, she doesn't take medicine, but she mixes a few herbs from here and there and then makes this concoction and then eats it, and then she is all right. So this kind of knowledge is lost and it is not being shared in the future generation. So this knowledge used to be common for everyone, and gradually it is being capitalized on. But and we are losing out on it. Then the real and unreal dilemma. Uh, so a lot of things that we see on screens today, and the reason why screens today are more harmful than they would have been before, is because most of what we see on screens is too colorful, or too stimulating, or it is more attractive than necessary, or it is built in such a way that even if it doesn't have a background or a meaning or any mental weightage, but it somehow captures your attention. So, what this does to children is, as they grow older, they start to lose touch with reality, because reality is not as stimulating to them as the screen. So, somewhere in the heads, the connections are made where they respond better or more actively to a screen than they do to physical people or conversations or social systems, things like that. So that is the digital dilemma. Now, another thing is, today we consider being busy as a trend, being busy as uh, the thing. If you are busy, then that is good. Uh, because of this, we have lost out on time to introspect. We don't spend enough time with ourselves, And if we don't spend enough time with ourselves, we don't understand ourselves, and hence it is even more difficult to understand somebody else. Then marks are have become more important than matter. So whatever is in the textbook, even if that was used for learning and not for just scoring, even that could have made a decent impact. But even that is not happening. So this is also one of the causes. Now, the figure that you see on the right side is a very interesting clock. It's a 24-hour clock where the zero is the time when the Earth formed, and then we have different markers to see at what stage what happened. So, for example, the origin of life happened somewhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So, around 4 a.m., the origin of life takes place, and single-celled algae, that is the first photosynthetic creatures, uh, organized photosynthetic creatures, start appearing at around 2 p.m. And then we have then evolution happens quite rapidly. Uh, what is even more interesting is humans arrived at 11:58:43. So that is less than 2 minutes, around a minute and a half or so. And in this much time, we have somehow managed to wipe out more than 60% of the species of the planet since the beginning. So, this goes to say what we are doing and where we are is something to really think about. So somebody had just mentioned that you are the product of 4 billion years of evolutionary success. Act like it. So this cycle, this clock that you see, is approximately 4 billion years. That is from here, 4 a.m. to this part, that is 11:58:43. It took us 4 billion years to evolve to this point, and this is who we are. We have managed to wipe out approximately 60% of the species of the planet. So, if this is what we see around us, as we began with this slide, the world is a mirror. You can imagine what is probably going on inside us. Now, coming to another clock, that is the doomsday clock. So, this is another interesting clock that somebody has made. Um, they are a bunch of scientists, atomic scientists, and you even have biotechnologists and psychologists and statisticians from across the world. They have made this doomsday clock, which is showing us how far away in terms of time are we from complete doomsday, like a place from where we can probably never return. So right now what they claim is we are 100 seconds from midnight. So 100 seconds from midnight means if the specific sequence of events line up, then there is a possibility that in 100 seconds something will happen because of which we may never be able to go back. Maybe somebody will push a nuclear button. Maybe somebody will do something because of which something things will become irreversible. So it is when you go through this page, you will realize that it is actually quite a rational way of thinking about it. We are that close, and if we do not act now, we may never have a chance later on. So, for example, right now we have already reached a stage where approximately 7 million deaths worldwide happen only because of pollution. Of these 7 million, 1.24 million happen in India. So every year, at least 1.24 million people are dying in India just because of pollution. Can you imagine that? Then going towards climate change, we already discussed how things are changing right now. There are also speculations that because of this global warming, what could happen is that ice caps, which are already melting, will reveal certain diseases, bacteria, fungi, and viruses, which we are not ready for. We are already in lockdown because of a certain virus, and we can't even imagine what would happen if those viruses came in contact with us. Then there are the great divides. We have been noticing there is a huge divide between various classes, various strata in the society today. The rich are getting immensely rich, the poor are getting immensely poor, and gradually the people in the middle are being either thrown on one side or the other. So this holds true not just in economic terms; it also holds true for things like spirituality. It holds true for things like education, true education, not academics, not qualifications, but actual education. And thanks to the press and the artificial intelligence being developed today, we are stuck in echo chambers. So echo chambers is what happens when you begin when you begin searching for a few things online, and then you have systems that throw the same kind of stuff at you all the time. So, for example, if you search for say dance videos on YouTube, you will end up being shown dance videos throughout, and then you will also maybe see advertisements on dancing shoes. You will probably see advertisements on dance classes. In on Facebook you start seeing sponsored pages from the same thing. So the artificial intelligence, the AI, is basically sorting out this data, that your search data, and based on that, it is putting you in echo chambers. So this is an echo chamber. You tend to hear everything that you already believe in, and that is what is being thrown at you. So you don't learn anything new. You are kept in that box. Then enforced development. In the name of development, a lot of things are happening which are quite questionable. One thing, one wave that we have seen in India in the last couple of years is the number of infrastructure projects being given clearance, even though they are in, say, forest land or wetlands or such precious ecosystems which must not be disturbed. And our general response to this is the government has the authority to do it, we can't do anything. But that is the worst way of thinking about it, because everyone has the power to do something. Raise a voice, start a movement, or just spread the message around. Do not turn a blind eye to it. Even this much is enough sometimes. So, just sitting quietly or just accepting things they are, it's really harmful to the society, because ultimately we are society. Here, J. Krishnamurti says it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't make it right. So, if you must have heard of Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero, he was one of the people who convinces Brutus to assassinate Caesar when Rome was succumbing to Julius Caesar's dictatorship. He makes a very interesting statement that the purpose of education is to free the student from the tyranny of the present. So, what happens every time is, um, if you are thinking in the classroom, if you are thinking only short term, so my success, my wants, my demands, um, you are basically stuck in the present, or what you think is the present. But education is supposed to pull you out of there, make you uncomfortable, help you understand your purpose, and raise you to that high standard. For example, if we can see the post on the right, where the purpose of education or the impact of education is shown. Uh, all the Germans during the Second World War, all of them were engineers and scientists and doctors. But somehow one man was able to convince them that that their skills, their intelligence can be used to do what they did, being able to kill so many Jews, being able to 6 million Jews, being able to torture them to death, being able to manufacture weapons of mass destruction. So, if one man is able to convince that education should work in such a way that the learning is on how to spot the signs of history repeating itself, how to understand that someone can become, or you yourself can be put in Hitler's position, and the circumstances that would lead you to do what he did, so that such circumstances never happen again. And it's only if we understand those circumstances can we understand how to stop history from repeating itself. So, coming to the part where we can actually do something in the classroom, do something in our schools, at home, with our children. Uh, we need to understand what we are doing wrong, or how can we move out of the cycle of what we are doing wrong. So the sins of education and the solution to them. So one is we often confuse academics and education. These two are extremely different. They are one is related to numbers and quantitative evaluations of a certain type of intelligence that has somehow become the norm, but it is not the norm at all. We all know there are some people who are more artistic but less inclined to numbers. There are some people who are very good with numbers but don't understand other people's emotions. There are some people who can play musical instruments very well, but they can't run a 100-meter race. So everyone has a different kind of intelligence. But unfortunately, we are working with a broken system. So we have two choices. One is to discard that system, and the other is to work within the system, within the frameworks of the system, but then tweak things in such a way that we do get the most out of education. So, the first thing we need to do is we need to understand that the books that we use are just tools to handle that which is beyond our reach. So, if you are already studying things related to, say, vehicles, and if you have vehicles around you, open a Maruti car, see what the engine looks like, see what the tires look like. But if you are sitting in front of a Maruti and then if you are reading a textbook about the same car, so that is actually a very big sin. You should use the textbooks, you should use the books only in those situations where things are beyond reach. Then the next is never give answers. Our general tendency nowadays is to look at the back of the chapter and take out the questions and then just give the answers on the board and expect the children to copy. Here, what the children understand is, yeah. So what the children understand is that the answers that they give in the classroom are more important than anything else, because that is what is ultimately going to give them the marks that they require. So somewhere we need to bring that shift in the consciousness that it is more important to figure out how to look for answers, to find answers, and hence make this system of learning a conscious process. So never give them answers, try to convince them to ask people to figure things out, to search it in books, search it in the environment around them, and then build the answer. So, charioteering the reptile brain. Now, there is something called the Tryon brain concept, where someone proposed that the brain, a human brain, consists of three gross layers. One is the reptilian brain, the other is the limbic brain, and the third is the neocortex. So the reptilian brain is reacts to stimulus. It is more instinct driven. So if something can basically overwhelm your instinct, it can essentially control you. It can control your brain. So the experiments that they performed were they began with observations. They noticed that most animals they tend to respond more to things that are that provide more stimulus. So, for example, if you have a bird and the bird has a lot of eggs in the nest, it will brood or give more love, so to speak, to the egg that is bigger in size, or it will brood more on the egg that is more colorful. So, if you keep increasing the colorfulness or the size of the egg, uh, gradually there comes a point where even if you give an artificial egg that is too big for the bird to sit on, it will slide off, it will keep sliding off the egg, but it will want to sit on that egg. It will want to warm up that egg. Then there will also come a point that it will try to, even if this egg is artificial, it will forget its own eggs, the eggs that it has laid by itself, you have putting in so much of effort, and it will uh, brood on the plastic egg or the artificial egg. So they noticed that instincts can override intelligence in a lot of animals. And if you notice, this is something that even human beings are using against human beings, or to get the most out of human beings, so to speak. So you notice this in commercials, you notice this in advertisements and companies, and the way malls are built. Malls are built so that you feel hungry. That is why you also have uh, cafeterias and food zones in malls. There are a lot of companies that are built in such a way that their logos themselves make you look twice. The advertisements that are made nowadays, they are more provocative. They elicit certain responses from people. So you tend to get drawn into these kind of things. But how can we come out of this? So this is where the charioteer or the neocortex comes in. So the horses that are the EDSOC, that is endorphin, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, the four happiness chemicals, and cortisol, the fear chemicals. So these two work um, in a complementary way, and if left to instinct, this is what takes us over. But the neocortex, the charioteer, rides over them, or rather overrides them. So this is a part that is stronger in primates, and it is even more strong in human beings. So if you consider the ratio of normal, the reptilian and the limbic brain to the neocortex, in primates, that is in chimpanzees and apes, it is around 1 is to 30, but in human being it is 1 is to 60. So humans have much better or more developed neocortex than primates. And before that, it was absent or not developed well at all. So this is something that we need to tap into. And how to do that? So one is we respond better to concepts. So in stories, if you notice, if somebody just gives you a list of characters, it it's of least interest to you. It's just a list of characters. You don't know the story. You don't know what is their relation. You don't know what has happened. But if you understand what are the threads that join these characters together, then it becomes an interesting story, and then you remember, and then you learn from it. So this is also the case with every other concept: science, mathematics, physics, chemistry, everything. If somebody tries to explain you the concept, then you absorb it quicker. And then over a period of time, once the concept has seeped in well, then you can introduce the terms. So then there is a realization that, oh, the concept, whatever I learn, this is what it is called. So this kind of understanding or this realization brings out the interest in children. Then the next point is exploring the spectrum instead of cutting it into subsets. We have this habit of segregating knowledge into compartments, and then we expect everyone else to follow the same compartments, but everybody's heads work differently. And the only universal way of learning is the natural sense of learning, where learning happens seamlessly. So you don't learn it as subjects, as maths, chemistry, physics, biology, where knowledge is segregated and separated in such a way that physics has to be studied in such a way, it has to be studied in a laboratory. Chemistry has to be studied with glassware, with test tubes and stuff like that. And maths has to be studied on a pen and with a pen and paper. So if we get out of these boxes and we create a spectrum of knowledge instead of these separate boxes, we can explore maybe things that are just around us, like just say a bulb. So a bulb can give you physics, it can give you mathematics, it can give you chemistry. Why does a bulb get fused? Uh, and why does it emit light when it's not fused? So these kind of things will help you understand the chemistry and the physics behind it. How bright is it? What kind of current do you have to give to make it brighter, and what can you do to make it dimmer? That also involves mathematics. So something like this. If you look at plants, plants can help you understand chemistry, biology. There is a certain sense of mathematics even in plants. So knowledge has to be, learning has to happen through the spectrum. Then journaling and diaries, this is a point that I've been repeating in almost all my presentations. I cannot stress this point enough. This is the single most powerful way to introduce introspection among children. And if someone can learn to keep a diary, someone can actually uh, learn to live life, so to speak. So this is where all the knowledge is assimilated. This is where everything is finally um absorbed within you, and that is the purpose of journaling. And since a lot of introspection goes into it, it also helps in the development of the neocortex. So better the neocortex, the more the child will have the ability to overcome or have executive control. So executive control is when you are able to control yourself in spite of your emotions. So a loss of executive control would mean someone who gets so angry that they start stomping their feet, they start beating people up and things like that. But if you are able to control that, if you are able to make sense of it, that is the power of the neocortex. So all this, if you notice, none of this can be taught, and that is the concept of education that we follow in our school. That is integral education. That is the first principle of integral education. That nothing can be taught. So this is the philosophy that has been given by Sri Aurobindo. So coming to today's topic, our culture, our language. So CBSE has suggested that in this world where as somebody pointed out very rightly in the morning, that in the world over, people are exploring the reason why Indians greet each other by folding their hands and saying namaste instead of having any kind of physical contact. No hugs, no handshakes, nothing. So, the transference of germs, the transference of energies, if someone has very malicious thoughts, so there is a transference, some kind of empathy because of some kind of empathy. So all this our ancestors were actually quite conscious about, but then it has been lost in the recent years. Then food habits. We had a certain system of food. In the morning, we discussed about how we generally tend to have dessert, sweet things at the end of the meal. But what sweet things do is they increase your craving. So the ancient people, like our ancestors and all, would probably um, prefer to have something sweet in the beginning instead of in the end, so that the food is relished better, and at the end you have something sour to break that hunger, to refresh your palate, so that you realize, your body realizes that yes, the stomach is full now. Then the impact of color on food. So certain foods induce more hunger. Usually red foods induce more hunger, and green foods, probably why children don't like them is they relate to the plants around us. So it's kind of plants around us, and also to peace and ultimately lack of hunger. Then the importance of multigrain. Polished wheat is something that had caught on during the British era. It is not native to us. So we used to have unpolished wheat. What has caught the fashion nowadays, the brown breads and everything. This was a normal food in the beginning. Then also having multigrain, so including it with say nachni and say jawar and bajra and things like that. So that would give a more wholesome food. Then even the organic farming techniques and organic vegetables, this was a natural way in the beginning, and now they have gained importance once again. So organic farming was a part of Vrikshatur Ved, which is one of our indigenous knowledge systems. Uh, like Africans have their own indigenous knowledge systems. The Orient has its own. Then the Norwegians, North Europeans have their own. So indigenous knowledge systems are basically knowledge systems developed. They are uh, transferred through word of mouth, and they are developed through a lot of learning and observation and experience. And this is knowledge which we tend to discard uh, because of the Western impact. So once again, these things are being brought into focus. Ayurveda, then Vrikshatur, yoga. Yoga is now commonly known as yoga, and what people usually do is just yogasan, which is the physical uh, exercises of yoga. But yoga essentially is a way of living. Now, okay, just an example of Ayurveda. So in 2018, in the beginning of 2018, I had a severe cough, and the cough didn't go away for almost 6 months, and my throat would dry out, and it was a very hacking kind of cough, and a very violent cough. So I would sometimes even puke because of that. Uh, we tried a whole bunch of allopathic treatments. I went from doctor to doctor in Amravati, out of Amravati, in Bombay, Pune, and so on. But ultimately, what helped is one of the doctors in Amravati, who is an Ayurvedic doctor. She suggested that I put 2 drops of desi ghee in each nostril just before I sleep and as soon as I wake up. So, um, in the beginning, it didn't sound logical to me, but she gave me the full explanation, and it made complete sense to me. So what most medicines, allopathic medicines, what they do is they they kind of reduce the mucus lining, because what the general assumption is that the mucus lining is what hosts the disease. So if you have a flu or a cough or something like that, it is because of the mucus that it is the mucus is a part of the disease basically. But what Ayurveda believes is that the mucus can be used to help you counter the disease. So the mucosal lining in your throat is what protects your throat from dust particles, from various germs. So that is your first line of defense. And agreed, while if you have disease, then it also houses uh, the pathogen. But what this does is, if you put ghee in, it forms a layer around your throat. So when I had my cough, my throat has become dry, and it is because of that I was not getting any relief. So the ghee made a lining, it made a layer, so that my throat doesn't get irritated because of dust or germs. And the ghee also traps the dust and germs, and he also has um, it doesn't let infection spread basically. So that helped me get out of it very quickly. So that is one thing that I experienced personally. Uh, One more thing that we tend to overlook is the tribal and the folk art that exists all around us. So this is the precursor of the art that we normally do. We have seen Varli art in a lot of places, the typical triangular men and women doing activities. Whereas Gond art is so while Varli art is more activity based, more lifestyle based, and culture based, Gond art is more about spirit, more about life, more about God and earth, that kind of a thing. Then we have music also. So in music we have Indian and Western music. Western music is related more to expressing or sharing your identity, establishing your identity, while Indian music is more in relation with the environment and communion with the nature around you and so on. So there are a certain rags that you do not sing in the afternoon or during the daytime, because probably it induces high body heat or something like that. So it's better if they are sung in the evenings or early mornings or something like that. So this is the kind of knowledge that is lost to us, but it is being dug out again, and we are discovering its significance today. So this can be shared with the children, uh, obviously after doing more research on it. Then folk tales. We have so many ancient folk tales based on. There is one series that is the um, Hitopadesh. Then we have Jataka tales. We have Panchatantra. One of the series also deals with the animal forms of Buddha. If I'm not wrong, that is the Jataka tales. So these are the tales that can be shared with children. So it will share knowledge of language with them in a very interesting way, um, while also teaching them our culture, our history, and our ancestry. Then etymology. There are a lot of words that have an Indian origin, even in the English language. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that uh, we have a very different way of speaking. We have a very different way of communicating. Like the concept of bhav and swabhav, things like that. So bhav, we usually use the words we use for value of things. So iska bhav kitna hai? What is the price? So if we use the same thing as swabhav, where it means your own price, that doesn't sound right. Swabhav is more related to your nature, your emotions. So that means if we extrapolate that same sense to the word bhav when we are in the market. So when what we are actually asking is not the price, what we are actually asking is what is the quality of this thing, what is the identity of this thing, what is the nature of this thing. So words also have a very interesting way of working in different languages. So it would be that is also something that we can explore with children. We have a lot of ancient texts like the Chanakya Niti, the Upanishads, the various Purans, and things like that. So there is a lot of knowledge even inside them, which can be shared with children. A lot of Indian writers are there. Satyajit Ray, Premchand, Bhagwati Charan Verma, Tagore, R.K. Narayan, Sudhamurti, and all of them have amazing stories. Indian dramas are also quite unique. Then there is the importance of Sanskrit shloks and mantras. What is the purpose of each slok? What is the purpose of each mantra? When is this slok chanted, or when is this mantra chanted? Then, so a lot of hidden knowledge is there in all these things. And the more you discuss this with children, it will be a zone of discovery for everyone, teachers, children, as well as parents. Then, coming to climate change, uh, we had a lot of ancient techniques to save water, uh, things like Eri, Kere, and Cherua, which are ancient techniques of water tank systems in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh, respectively. So here, what they do is, if there is a river, they'll draw a channel that is parallel to the river, and they will line up a series of wells on that channel. So when the river is full during the rainy seasons, instead of creating floods, it will let water pass through these channels and it will fill up one lake. And if that lake becomes full, it will start going through the other channel and it will fill up the next lake, then the next lake. So it helps distribute the water in a vast area while conserving the water, while preventing floods. So it works in multiple zones. Then you also have permaculture, that is a more natural sense of dealing with food and agriculture. And we also can study the effect on um, okay, so food and oil, or oil in food, also is related to climate. So we often notice that certain plants are grown or come out in the winters, and these are the plants that also give us heat. So one such example is the mustard. So mustard leaves, or the mustard sabji, that is called sarso ka saag, it's usually had in winter, so it increases your body heat, and it works in that way. So that is one sabji that you don't get very easily in the other seasons, but we get it in winter, and it also helps in increasing our body heat. So it's complementary in that way. Then we can also discuss about acclimatization with the children, where your body tries to get used to the temperatures, the rising temperatures. And this is very easy if we do this consciously. So, in the first instance, if we feel that it's getting very hot, let's turn the fan on one. If you don't do that, and if you wait for the next time and the next time, maybe where you would normally have put the fan on 3, you would now begin the fan on 1. So gradually your body becomes acclimatized to it, and right now it is of utmost importance because the temperatures are just going higher and higher, and it doesn't seem to be stopping, except during this corona time when all the vehicles have stopped. Now, if you notice, a lot of pictures are floating around even on social media that in certain cities, uh, even mountains are visible from hundreds of kilometers. Uh, in cities where the skies would normally be gray and nothing would be visible beyond a certain distance, you can now see mountains very clearly. So that is there, and the air is much freer nowadays. It is easier to breathe. Particulate matter is lesser. So yeah, this climate change is also happening. Then, since a lot of these things are not easily understood by children because they happen beyond the sense of time that is recognized by children, you could maybe help them notice or observe these things in a smaller time frame. So, for example, the migration of animals and birds, if they make a record that a certain bird comes in this season only, and when I say in this season, it means in this temperature, in this climate, not in terms of months. So the moment the temperatures reach a certain level, then this bird comes and the other bird goes away. This is seen with bee eaters. Bee eaters are usually seen in winters, and as the winters end, the bee eaters disappear, and the Oriental magpie robins, which is black and white bird with a very sweet and high pitched sound, that starts appearing during this time, the summertime. So these kind of observations, if children can make, and we observe with them, this is a learning for both of us. Then we already discussed how the current temperature scenario, the current climate scenario has rendered the textbooks obsolete. One more shift in mentality that we need to do is moving from consumerism to contribution, where at one point of time we used to um, buy a lot of things. Today, because nothing is available and somehow we are still happier with the things that are around us, and we get more irritated with the number of things around us. Uh, Somewhere that realization has already come in, and if it is brought in front to the forefront consciously, it will also happen. It will also be imbibed as knowledge that the more number of things you have, the less time you have. So, someone very interestingly put up the statement that if you need something to put things in it, that means you already have too many things. So, this is the time when we can explore minimalism, when we can start decluttering our lives. A very simple way to understand this is through assets and liabilities. I know this term is usually used in financial concepts, but even otherwise, it is useful to look at it. Assets are basically, in financial terms, they are basically things that put money in your pocket, and liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. So, similarly, in your life, assets are things that put time and value to your life, and liabilities are things that remove the time and don't let you have value in your life. So, related to this, Mahatma Gandhi had said that the world has enough for everyone's needs, but not everyone's greed. So now this was more related to how we can bring our country, our culture, our language to the classroom or in our homes to the children basically. There are ways where we can do the same thing with the world. So if you can have a parallel project with the child, you share the knowledge, the understanding with the child for your country, your traditions and stuff. Similarly, if the child explores another country, another people's culture and concepts, so that way there is a double learning happening. You learn more about the world, not just where you are living. So that is one. Then, if we also discuss on how nature and climate has shaped our culture, so the way we had Adivasis and Banjaras. So Adivasis are basically early settlers, and Banjaras are nomads. So how and why they settled in such a way? Banjaras didn't settle; they started moving around. So why they move around? If this is something we explore with the children, that also will be an interesting avenue to go through. Then there is the concept of inclusiveness and vikas. So a lot of times we hear people saying that we need to do this for their vikas, for their development. But the truth is, we are not very clear on our own development. How can we uh, do activities for their development? They are already sorted out. They are already happy. They are already glad that they have the trees, they have the medicinal plants around them. Everything is available to them. But we are taking it away from them. We brought in bottling units and plants of soft drinks, and we have polluted their waters. We have destroyed the ecology, because of which they are suffering. So it is high time that we sort ourselves out instead of pushing them towards an enforced development. Then coming to natural education, if we pay more attention to learning from everything around us, from the people, the places, and how do we learn from this? Every time we see something, questions arise. Every time these questions arise, a certain effort is put into discovering uh, how this works or discovering the answer behind this question. So, the perfect time for getting your questions answered through inquiry is when the question comes up. Even if it is things that are very questionable, uh, okay, I'm using the word question too many times. So, if they are things that are not well accepted by society, if they are things that are controversial, things that people don't talk about, even if the child asks them at a certain stage, it is better to be honest with the child, better to be open with the child, and we use the correct terminology there. So, this is how natural education happens. Then, coming to the point of true patriotism. So, gradually people are coming back to India. We see this. What was happening before as the brain drain is now being reversed as a reverse brain drain. So more people are coming back to India, more people are returning to their towns and villages and trying to do something there. So true patriotism is not just going on the street and shouting in support of India or something like that, or what you normally see on Republic Day. People just wildly drive around on their bikes, waving a flag or something like that, and then you find flags strewn or all across the roads, lying in garbage bins and things like that. That is false patriotism. If you really want to do something for your country and do it where you are, because everything can be worked on. There is nothing called perfection. There is always only ahead and behind. So, this part I wanted to summarize with a story about Tilak. So, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Gopal Krishna Gokhale were very good friends in the beginning, but then they became rivals later on because Tilak was a radical and Gokhale was a moderate. Uh, so, there was this moment when the British declared that we should have a law against child marriage, and we would um, on very superficial notes probably feel that that was a very good move by the British, and it probably was a very good uh, initiative that the British had taken up, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale was for it, was in support of it, but Tilak was against it. So uh, Gokhale and Tilak, both of them had a big argument about this, and Gokhale would ask him, uh, "You don't think this is a very retarded mindset that we are still following child marriage, and don't you think this is harmful to the development of the society?" Tilak said, yes, maybe. But if this change, if this learning doesn't happen from within, if it is enforced by a law, enforced by a legal system, then it will be even more destructive. So this was the point that Tilak made, and very rightly so. He also mentioned that if the future generations don't learn that we fought for a freedom and we achieved it, we didn't get it handed over by the British. This is what we learn in our textbooks, right? That the non-cooperation movement won us the freedom because the British finally agreed that yes, you deserve it, and they gave it to us. But that is the worst way to learn about a freedom when so many millions of people laid their lives for it. And because of this, we can see the effects in the youth today. We can see how the first example is the amount of garbage that we see around us. Nobody who loves their country would put garbage in places which can't be cleaned. Nobody who loves their country would spit on walls which somebody will have to come and clean. So this is an obvious effect of what Tilak was talking about. So learning must happen inside. It should reach as deep within as possible. So now bringing it to the classroom. Um, so we discussed about the diversity and inclusiveness that is observed in animals. If the children get to observe that, if the children get to mull over it, think about it, it teaches them a lot of different things that wouldn't be taught in any book, any course, any syllabus, anything. And how to do it, so they can observe migrations, they can observe the coming of certain animals, the going of certain animals. We notice that we see a lot of monkeys in the city during the mango season because in at least in our city, in our belt, we have a lot of mango trees, so the monkeys are always ready to pounce on them. Then there's bird watching on uh, binoculars, professional binoculars may seem a bit expensive. You will get one for something like 7 or 8,000, but trust me, it will be well worth your time and money. And they can observe a lot of different things with it. Um, Stargazing is another thing. We are right now witnessing a lot of meteor showers. I think it's going on till the 28th of May. So that is also something that can be done. Then education and conscious decisions. So whatever activities we do, if we think about it a little bit, it makes a hell lot of difference. So for example, if nowadays that trend has begun that a lot of schools do cooking in their campus with the children, and which is a great way to do things, but at the same time you should be aware of how you are doing it. So if you take that opportunity to help the children learn where the food has come from, the whole logistics of it. It's grown in the farm. Why in a particular farm? Where does wheat grow if you are making rotis? Where does ragi grow if you're in the south? Things like that. So why does it grow here, and is it uh, how it has influenced the society, how it has influenced our culture, things like that. So if all this is explored with the children, it's more fun, and at the same time it affects them more deeply. Then media exposure. If we can maybe try to understand what kind of media our children are being exposed to, um, that would probably help us help them segregate or distinguish between things that are constructive, things that are destructive, things that will take the society forward, things that will pull it back. Most of the movies that we see nowadays are, the blockbuster movies, um, the movies that are of actual no value, actually no value. It doesn't have any kind of storyline. It doesn't make you think. It doesn't make you um, ponder about certain things. It doesn't educate you. You don't learn anything from it. It's just shallow entertainment, and it trains the mind that it's okay not to learn. If you do something and if you do it without meaning, it's okay to do it because everything else that you did was with meaning. But the fact is, if you do something with meaning, it itself is so fulfilling that you wouldn't need to look for a break. You wouldn't need to look for an outlet. So, say for example, if how many of you like art? How many of you like music? Can you just put that in the chat box? If you just write art or music, if you want to write painting or any instrument or something like that, that also you can put in. Classical music, like both art, okay, music. So think about it like this: that this thing that you do, either play music or sing or do artwork, if you do this for 3 hours at a stretch, do you realize that the time has gone by? Do you realize that the time has gone by? And more importantly, do you feel like taking a break after that? That, okay, I did 3 hours of art, now I deserve to watch a movie or I deserve to go somewhere outside. Right? So, since you like this, since you are so engaged in it, since you are so involved in it, you don't need anything else. You don't need an outlet, so to speak. So, imagine if you are living like that. If a child grows up in that kind of an environment, if a child grows up with that kind of a mindset, that everything around is for learning, everything around is something that can uh, expand my horizons. It is something that can uh, you know really engage me and really interest me. So they wouldn't look for something that is insensible as an outlet. They wouldn't look for something that is illogical, irrational, and destructive as a reward for themselves. Then we can also have a discussion on Indian brands. We can also have a discussion on controversial topics like electric cars. So, on Indian brands, suppose a lot of this has been going on now that because of the corona, people have started realizing that we should buy Indian, we should buy things that are made in our country and help our economy. Fine, all that is fine. But then the whole reason why people started buying things from outside was because we have this tendency, we buy something, if we don't like it, we change our company, we change our brand. But that is not the solution. If you have bought something with your money, and if that money is being circulated because of you, isn't it also your responsibility to provide a couple of minutes of feedback and let the person know, okay, see, I bought this from you, but I didn't like it, and this is the reason I did not like it. If you let people know, if you let people understand, then that is how both of you will grow, not just one. The company will also grow, and the you will also grow because you are a part of the ecosystem. You are a part of the financial system that the company is also a part of. So just because of dissatisfaction, people moved to buying imported products. Just because of dissatisfaction, companies like companies that we usually buy from, these came up, and they kind of pushed down our local companies. But if we would have stuck with the local companies and we would have told them, you see, this is what we expected from the product, but this is, can you do something about it? Can you work on it? So maybe they will also start making better products. All they need is a feedback. They just need to know what their customers are liking, what their customers are not liking. And they don't get to know that if you just change your brand, if you just change your company. So that is one. Another discussion that you can have, the controversy of electric cars. So most of the power generated in India is from coal. So if you just switch from petrol vehicles to electric vehicles, it's not really going to help matters. Yes, if your vehicles are have a solar panel on top, or if they are charged through solar energy, then yes, it makes a difference. It makes a lot of difference. But if you are just using your typical electrical supply, then it's you are actually making things worse. You're not making it better. You're making it worse. Then circle of influence. This is an activity that everyone can try. I'll see if I can put it up on the notice, sorry, on the whiteboard. So, if during a family meeting you take a circle of concern. So, circle of concern is basically a circle where you put in the things that are bothering you, things that you are dissatisfied with, things that you feel shouldn't be there or should be changed. So, this is your circle of concern. Now, in this circle, you can draw another circle, which is your circle of influence. Now, in this circle, you start putting things from the circle of concern, which you feel uh, you can work on. So, for example, if you feel, okay, like in this case, in the Corona days, if you feel that you are feeling lost and you don't have any um, understanding of the dates or time or anything like that, then what can you do, right? So uh, something that helps you give a perspective, something that helps you understand the hours of the day, and something that helps you work out a more productive day is the timetable. So if you help the child make a timetable, if you make a timetable for yourself, then obviously the day will be spent more productively, and the child will also be more involved in it and will understand better. So this is how the circle of concern, the circle of influence works. So the first circle, the bigger circle, is the number of things, the things that are that are of concern to you, and the smaller circle is the things that you would or you could act on right now. So it's a very simple activity, it's a very small activity, but it gives a lot of clarity. And for the children, it's very helpful because it it helps them understand that if you figure out your circle of influence, nothing is actually off limits. So coming back to the last slide, so we are at the end now. So that was circle of influence. Then, okay, to end on the end note of this presentation, I just wanted to bring up this point that a lot of us start uh, running behind the term best, and this is a very harmful term. You see this everywhere. You see the best car company, the best school, the best teacher, the best student, the best anything. So this is a very, very, very dangerous term, best. The problem is because the moment you say best, it becomes a finite game. Now, the difference between an infinite game and a finite game is a finite game is a game that you play to win. As soon as you win, the game is over. But an infinite game is a game that you play for the sake of playing and for the sake of working on yourself continuously, consistently, and with resilience. So if you want to be in an infinite game, you can never use the word best. It is very destructive in your process. You can never look at a person or any yeah, you can never look at a person and say, okay, yes, this person has won his life. There is no winning in life. Life is not that is not how life works. So if you really want your children to be ready for life, then we have to get rid of this term called best. And this is basically the term of someone who is very insecure and someone who uh, feels that you have to impose a mark, impose a rank, so that there is a definition of best in which you fit. So, if you really want to develop children with patience, endless patience, an immense amount of resilience, a passion for learning, and an endless learning, then it is best if we focus on an infinite game. Focus on the long run. Don't focus on just creating socially defined winners. So, this is what I wanted to leave you with, something for you to think about. Um, and I'll be posting these things online through mail and also through YouTube. I am not very sure whether the previous recording has been processed properly because of the electricity problem, but I will definitely be sharing the presentations. So yeah, these are the resources, the different sites that are there in the CBSE circular. Somebody had asked me for the CBSE circular. I'll just put up um, the details for that also. And in case you have any questions.